Good evening. So, first of all, the first thing to understand is we are here this evening for a very special reason. It's not a worldly reason. It's completely different. So if you normally come to a lecture or a talk or one of these clubs or something like that, it's always about worldly things, animals or cat protection or something to do with worldly, but this is a spiritual meeting, and so the meaning of tonight, the meaning of these gatherings is a sacred sort of special, just completely different from a normal worldly topic. And so the information is quite profound, and the effect of the words, the effect of the speech is the talk is supposed to be freeing for your mind. The Tibetan word for Buddhist is Ngangpa, and Ngangpa means insider. And this is very important. You must realize that all the worldly events, all the worldly interests are external. They're about the body, and they don't really have a good effect on the mind in the long term. They have a short-term pleasure effect or an interest effect, but they don't really they don't free the mind, they capture the mind. And the Buddha appeared in this world and taught innumerable beings to free their mind, and called it liberation and eventually enlightenment. But to start with, we need liberation. And liberation means, the big problem is that people, even though they say they're Buddhist, especially in the West, but also in the East, people say they're Buddhist, but they don't really understand what this word liberation means. What is it that's being liberated? And at first, we can think of it as liberating ourselves from suffering or from problems, trouble. But actually, the truth is that we are liberating the mind. And the reason we can't say we're liberating ourselves is because actually we are liberating the mind from the self. So this is a big mistake that people make in spiritual pursuits, because many people, I probably could say the majority of the people who feel that they are engaging in a spiritual practice, their actual intention, their motivation is for their kind of improvement of the self, or for themselves to escape, which is fine in the beginning, it's okay. But but when one goes deeper into the spiritual path, you must realize that the reason all the major religions advise selflessness instead of selfishness is because the self-grasping of the mind is the poison. So if you're using a spiritual path to improve yourself, your idea of yourself, then this is actually not a spiritual path. The real spiritual path causes one to be humble and selfless and kind and loving and warm and sweet. And the self causes one to be prideful and inward looking in terms of exclusivity and exclusive of others, and wanting the best for oneself and looking after one's own concerns and not caring about the concerns of others. And so we have to be very careful when we're spending our lives, because it's a precious thing, our life, and we have to decide what we're going to do with our life. And if it's the greatest purpose, which is the spiritual path, this really is the most meaningful thing one can do with one's life, then you must realize that the secret key to all spiritual practice, no matter what religion. Success on any spiritual path is down to selflessness. So please don't make your intention for spiritual accumulation or gain something personal. The gain from spiritual practice, the gain from a spiritual path, is that you lose the self. The mind is decontaminated, the mind is cleansed, purified, and once that happens, what we call the obscurations are removed. There is this, bliss or happiness, joy, real joy that comes. But at the moment, it's heavily, deeply obscured by all the things that we have done, not just in this life, in many, many past lives. It's been a vast, all I can say is that there is a lot to be removed. There's a vast, thick cover which covers the pure mind. And fortunately, the pure mind is indestructible. So it doesn't matter how many lives, it can go on forever, eternally, being reborn, according to the obscurations, according to the contamination of mind. But the actual base, what you might call the inner flame, can never be put out. It's absolutely indestructible and it's perfectly pure. And so the Buddha, the Buddhist teachings, the entire Buddhist path, and everything that the Buddha taught is for you, every single being, to reveal that flame, remove the covering, and allow the flame to unite with everything, all. At the moment it's separated. It's like, imagine a flame inside a iron ball. So we gradually erode this iron ball away, and eventually the flame is released, liberated, and it reunites with what we call the omniscient ground luminosity, or the all. We just call it the all. So the nature of your mind is the basis of all, and we need to unite it with the all again. What is separating it? It's our sense of self. And so that's the whole point of every single religion, every single spiritual practice, and it's the real meaning of life. It's the real point. If you use your life to do this, then at the end of this life and in the future lives, you will reap the benefit forevermore. But of course, that's not what people are doing, and the people enjoy the self, enjoy the experiences of existence, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, delicious food, and seeing the sunset, sunrise. This is beautiful, that is lovely. And this is all kind of a sensory pleasure. And in that sensory pleasure experience, there is a self which is experiencing, which is receiving, like a repository. You are receiving the experience, and you're feeling that you gain something from that experience. There's a pleasure. And then from that pleasurable experience, and all the worldly beings have this to some extent. We enjoy things. But that enjoyment isn't just, the problem isn't actually the enjoyment. There's nothing wrong with really enjoyment in the moment, in the spontaneous moment. There's that joy, enjoyment is okay. That joy that comes is fine. But what happens is our mind is very addictive, habitual, and it grasps at that pleasure and wants more. And each time it wants more and gets more, it then clings. So there's grasping and then there's clinging. And this clinging promotes this addictive habit. And in the end, all we want is nice things. All we want is the pleasure of finding interesting, nice things. And from that develops the aversion to not nice things, to bad things, to things that we don't want. They're unpleasant experiences. We have aversion to those, and we have attachment to the nice things. And that is how our mind, that is how our, what we call the relative mind of worldly life, that's how it operates. We want the nice things, make us happy, and we want to avoid the bad things because it makes us unhappy. Aversion and attachment. We have attachment to the nice, aversion to the not nice. And so that is the basic foundation of the Buddha's teaching, to free us from this dichotomy, this dualism, duality of mind, where we're conflicting and battling and with our emotions and attitudes and trying to manipulate the situation for our own. Well, this is the problem. If you really get into the psychology of it, who is it that we're trying to please, and who is it that receives the pleasure, and what is the game that we're playing, and why? So that's the basic layout of the Buddhist path, and the reason for all religions actually is to liberate the mind and find the true natural real happiness at the center. So over the last 12 months we have given talks about what the Buddha called the wheel of life. He had a painting done 2,500 years ago, and to give to a king, and it explained the wheel of existence. And the wheel of existence is a wonderful diagram of life and death, and in between life and death, the causes and effects of reality, what we call reality. And so everything is mapped out there, and we've, over the last 12 months, we've given one talk per month, and each one of those months was one of the 12 interdependent stages, the outer ring of the wheel of life. And so that is finished now, but those videos are available on YouTube and Facebook. If you just put in Sakya Belper, you can see those. But the reason I'm mentioning it is because tonight is the first of a new 4-week course, and tonight's for the next 4 weeks, the topic is a very, very famous, sacred, holy, Buddhism in Tibet has been about over 1,000 years, and the Buddha taught from the sutras, basically in what we call the Shastras in Tibet, the great masters extracted what we call the 4 great seals, and these 4 great seals were extracted from the sutras, and the sutra necessarily means that it came directly from the Buddha, and anything that's called a sutra that didn't come directly from the Buddha isn't a sutra. Sutra actually means a Buddhist sutra. If it's called a Buddhist sutra, it's actually the words of the Buddha precisely. And so we study these as well as other things, but they are a very great, obviously, foundation for the path and the teaching and the practice. And anyway, from these, there's 2 main sutras that these 4 great seals came from. And the Tibetan masters, I think, they're not Indian masters, I think it was the Tibetans that called them the 4 great seals. And the reason they're called the 4 great seals is because in ancient times, the seal was the way of telling that something is authentic. The king would wear a ring normally, but sometimes it's a stamp, because obviously this is generations, centuries and centuries of great kings, and sending out proclamations and orders throughout the kingdom. And in those days, of course, there was no internet or post service, so it was sent by rider to all the heads of the provinces. And the way they knew it was genuine and it wasn't from an enemy king or some kind of other problem people, the way they knew it was genuinely from the king was this wax seal. He would use this intricately carved ring stamp in the wax. And when they saw that, in those days you wouldn't have had the technology. It was made by the top craftsmen, and no one would have had the technology to be able to copy it from the wax seal. So you knew it was genuinely from the king. You knew it was authentic. So these 4 Buddhist laws, or laws, natural laws from the Buddha that he explained, are known as the 4 great seals, because they contain, or they have on them, the seal of the real king. the king of all kings, the actual master of reality, the Buddha, the fully enlightened Buddha Shakyamuni. And so they're called the four great seals. And so what are these four great seals? The first one, the Buddha said, is all conditioned things are impermanent. And this is, when the Buddha said that, the ground shook, and lightning, and because that is not what normally worldly beings, and when I say worldly beings, I'm not just talking about humans. There's many, many worldly beings higher than us, more developed than us, more virtuous than us, and they attended Buddha's teachings, and they were all under the same deluded impression as us. And what I mean by that is permanence. We have this delusion of permanence. We do not really accept impermanence. Impermanence is a wonderfully profound, important natural law that if one concentrates on it and utilizes it in one's daily life all the time, it's very, very liberating. It has a wonderfully freeing effect for the mind. But people do not understand, we don't understand the benefit of it, and we think that there is benefit in grasping and clinging, as I said. But actually, if you meditate on impermanence, gradually at first, gently, every day, it has a most wonderful, wonderful beneficial effect on one's mind. So this line, all compounded things, all compounded or all conditioned things or all compounded phenomena, because obviously this has been translated from Pali and then into Sanskrit and then into Tibetan and now into English. So the words are, but the basic meaning is compounded or conditioned things means anything which relies on causes for its perceived existence. So what have we got? What could that possibly mean? Well, actually, it's easier to try and think of something that exists that doesn't rely on causes, because absolutely everything relies upon causes. Everything is produced. This is the first major realization. And if one has this realization, then you can think of it as a kind of a certificate. You've kind of made a step out of the ordinary state of mind of a sentient being. All phenomena are produced. They are all reliant upon causes for their existence. This cup of tea, for example, if I say to you, if you'd walked in here tonight and I started talking to you about the wonderful, omniscient magic of a cup of tea, you would have thought I was insane. But now if I explain that in a cup of tea, there's the tea leaves and the milk and the water. The water comes from the sky, the rain, the snow, wherever the water in that tea is the water of the world. And the water of the world relies on the world, which relies on the water coming from the clouds. So there's the sky, the clouds, and everything is floating in space. So the entire universe is in a cup of tea. The tea leaves, the people who picked the tea leaves, the man who drove the lorry with the boxes of tea bags to the supermarket, the person who owns the supermarket, everyone, the people who made the cup. It's endless, the amount of functions and causes and fabrications that are in everything. And what we do is we just stamp it with a word, cup of tea, a term, a tablecloth, flour, and this makes it very sterile and mundane. And we mustn't do that. We mustn't allow the concept of things to just become a list in our mind, a list of objects, because then what we're doing is we're just living in a list. We're living in a dictionary. Actually, the truth of all of these things is that they are all slowly dissolving, they're all slowly decaying, they're all slowly transforming, transmuting, changing. Everything is all the time. And it's all happening spontaneously in this moment. Every moment is now, but also everything in this moment is fresh because it's changed slightly. When you go and see, like for instance, you go and see the ruins of an old building. An old building, once it's the ruin has become a ruins, it didn't suddenly become a ruins one day. If you just build a brand new house and leave it, gradually it will become a ruin without any maintenance. Obviously we keep maintaining everything, so we don't see the impermanence. But actually every single thing requires maintenance because it is eroding, it's decaying, it's getting less, it's impermanent. So Buddha said the first main realization on the spiritual path, and real fundamental realization, is all conditioned things are impermanent. It means conditioned means relies on causes. It's a collection of causes. So the collection of the causes of the tea isn't just tea bags, water and milk. It's the cow, or in this case oats, and the person who picked the tea, the rain that watered the tea plants, everything, the earth it grew in, the space, the sun, the sky, the clouds, everything, all the causes put together make the cup of tea. And with the interesting, one very, very deep, interesting, profound realization is that without one of those causes, without the clouds to carry the rain, without the earth to grow the tea in, then there'd be the whole thing couldn't be there. It wouldn't be what it is. It might be a different drink, but it wouldn't be a cup of tea. And the same goes for every other phenomena. Flour relies on certain causes. That, now that the flour, what we say, exists, that particular makeup of that flour relies on absolutely precise certain causes. And if any one of those causes was slightly different, the flour would have been different. So when I say different, I mean missing. Not different, not like not enough rain, but if there was no such thing as rain, or no such thing as sun, or earth was something else, then it's surprising how exact the causes have to be for a specific phenomena to appear. So what is the benefit of this realization? Realizing impermanence. If one realizes impermanence in one's heart, which is the real mind, and not just a conceptual understanding, but actually realizes it directly in the heart in meditation, what is the benefit? Well, the benefit is that you stop being attached to things of pleasure, because if you check when you are attached to things that you like, it's because you believe there's some kind of permanent self which is gaining, accumulating, collecting this, as if once you've experienced all these pleasurable things, something inside will be full up, something will be better, and you can I don't know. There's no worldly logic, has no actual logic to it, so I can't really explain. We have just got this idea that there is someone accumulating pleasurable experiences, and they're sort of going in some kind of mental scrapbook, and that is producing, constructing a better person. I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense. So anyway, what we've got is, at the moment, as normal worldly sentient beings, we've got some attachment to gaining, accumulating pleasure. And obviously when we realize impermanence, that all these things, we are impermanent, and all the things we experience are impermanent, everything is impermanent, everything keeps changing. When we accept that, because we don't, at the moment, we don't want to accept change. We don't want things to change. We want things to stay the same, and we're fearful of change. And like I say, that's why we keep maintaining everything, and everything is concrete, and the woods and the forests, etc., are being built on, and it's just trying to keep things the same, stabilize, but you can't stabilize it, because all conditioned things are impermanent. Now, the other side is the aversion, the other main delusion that all beings have. On one side is attachment, on the other side is aversion. We do not want, like I said, we do not want change. We have aversion to change, and yet everything is changing. And so on the one side we have, for example, we love, what can I use? One day if you're a gardener, you love the rain. And some people are attached to the rain because they need it for their vegetables. But then the next day, or in the same day, there are many, many people who absolutely detest the rain. They have aversion to the rain. The rain is neither good or bad. But because we are depending, all our attachment and aversion is down to our own ascribed agenda. It depends on how it affects us. And that shows that it is just a relative judgment. It's not ultimately true. The ultimate truth of rain is it's not good or bad. It's no need to have attachment or aversion to it. Your opinion on it doesn't matter. But your opinion comes because you have a very, very strong idea of a permanent self. It's not a temporary self. You don't think, oh, I'm impermanent, and therefore I still. If you really understand impermanence, then everything calms down. You're no longer strong attachment to anything because you know it's all changing. No longer attachment to aversion, no longer strong aversion to anything because also it's changing. The bad things change also. So the good things, we're fearful of the good things changing, and we don't want things to change into bad, but it's all change, and so change must be accepted. When something bad happens in your life, anything that you do bad just means something that you find unpleasant. Realize that it's also impermanent. It will end. We like that. We are very acceptable. That's very acceptable to us. But when the same things happen to the good things, the things we're attached to, and we have to face that they will end. Oh, no, this is too much. It's not acceptable. So this is crazy. This is crazy. Not being able to accept that the good things end, but loving the fact that the bad things end. It goes to show how biased and deluded our mind is, because in reality no phenomena is good or bad. It's just your own ascribed projection. If we call it in the Dharma, it's known as imputation. We impute a value on things and decide. We have two lists, good and bad, and this good list has all the things we personally like, and this list has all the things that we personally don't like, attachment and aversion. And then if you compare lists with someone else, it's different. The two lists are different. No one has the same things on every list. You don't like dog muck, but if you compare if you compare your list with a fly, it's the top of the like list. Flies love dog muck. So the point is that the same basic nature of mind is in every single being. And if anything could be, which it can't, but if it could be ultimately good like we think it is, then even the flies, every single being will think it's good. There's no such thing. There's no thing that every single being thinks is good. And same with the bad things. There's no one thing that every single being thinks is bad. Even death. Death is the one thing that everyone hates, dislikes, is the worst possible thing ever. But then people commit suicide. So they obviously think death is good. That's why they're doing it. It's a crazy mind. It's an absolute crazy logic. The self-logic is crazy. But what we need to do is realize, first of all, impermanence. When you realize the impermanence, there's many, many extending wisdom understandings, realizations which come from impermanence. It's not just oh, everything is impermanent, so I don't need to be attached. That's the basic. But then from impermanence, many benefits in your mind, many virtues will come. So if there's many people these days bicker, They have a disagreement with others. And if you have got some kind of, depending on your, it's directly proportional to the amount of practice you do in meditation, how much you contemplate impermanence. But depending on that, when someone abuses you, if they're a difficult situation, just through the impermanence, realizing the impermanence of that situation, you'll hardly be affected. Like I say, it depends. If you've got a real direct, deep understanding, realization of impermanence, then nothing really matters to you. Nothing affects your mind because you realize it's all changing. There's no need to be affected by anything. My very precious teacher, Khenpo Thubten, Venerable Khenpo Thubten, this side. One of the first teachings he ever gave to the public in the UK, that I was there, he said, basically gave a talk on impermanence, and he said, at the moment, your mind is like the homeowner, the householder, the man or woman who owns their own house. When they're at home, they're very settled, and they don't ever think about having to leave the home. It's their permanent home. Whereas the impermanent mind, once someone has more wisdom and realizes the situation, and therefore realizes that all conditioned phenomena are impermanent, has the hotel mind. When you move into a hotel or even a motel, depending on your depth of understanding, when you move into a hotel, when you live in a hotel, it's only for a week or two. You're not going to be there long. You check your mindfulness. It's a different state of mind that you have when you walk in through your own front door of your home and when you walk into the room of a hotel. You have a different feeling. And that is a very, very, obviously the teacher here, Khenpo Thubten, is a monk, has been a monk since he was 7 in the monastery. And so they live and practice the hotel mind or even motel mind. Their mind is just spontaneously in the moment now. They have no idea about the future, they have no grasping at the future, and they have no clinging to the past, which is what we call the delusion of the 3 times. Normally we have clinging and grasping to the past, and let's say clinging to the past, grasping at the future, and also both clinging and grasping to the present. And these 3 times actually don't exist. The mind is only ever actually live right now. That's all we've got. We can't really cling to this narrative, this story of past and future. So the mind, once you realize what the mind is, the nature of the mind in this very moment, and one of the main ways of doing that is by realizing the impermanence of every situation, every phenomena, the mind is liberated. You're freed. Well, I say you're, but anyway, the mind is freed. The mind is liberated from that dichotomy, that situation, that conundrum of, it's very complicated, past and then present and then future and then where am I, who am I, what was I doing, what will I be doing, planning. Oh, I did that wrong before, I don't do that again, and what if I do it again? And it's crazy, the I is always in there. What if I do it again? I, it's constant, and there's no such thing. The mind is just what we call spontaneous primordial awareness in the moment. It's actually always awake. Even when you're asleep, the mind is awake. It's just the relative mind and the body which sleeps. But the actual true mind is always perfectly stable, perfectly awake, perfectly calm, pure. It doesn't have any of these characteristics or details. It's just the covering, the obscuration of over the top of it that I'd say it's not you personally, but since a long time, many rebirths, this covering of delusion is built up on the real natural state, the real universal flame. I don't know. There's no words for it. It's just what we call primordial awareness or ground luminosity. And what we've done is we've built up habitual tendencies and propensities over it, and then it causes rebirth. And every time we're born, we act upon those propensities and habitual tendencies, and that is what forms the shape of our body and our conditions and our situations and our karma. Karma means action. Action is all those things that have built up the cover, and that cover is what forms our life. And we believe that it's true every time. We believe means we identify with what occurs every time we're born. And every time we're born, we believe that that is inherently, permanently me, a self, my name, my identity. But actually, if you check back through the past lives, which one are you going to say is you? Because at the moment you think it's you. The last time you thought it was you. The time before that you thought it was you. Every being keeps doing that. Every time we're born, it's definitely permanently me. And actually, the truth is, all conditioned things are impermanent, and we are conditioned, of course, by our parents. We live off the land, we breathe the air, all of these causes. So if you go through all the causes, you can't actually find anything that you can identify yourself with. You can't say, this is me, because it's all causes. Just the same as a table, for example, that you have let's say a wooden table. I mean, this could do this steel table if you like. I mean, there's the man who made it. The steel had to be, was iron ore, smelted down and then run through a machine and then constructed and welded legs and top. We say table. We've got this conceptual idea of table, but what is it? The same with any phenomena, any object. If you actually look at it, what is the connection between our perceived idea from the name, the identification tag of it, and the actual item? What is a table? You'd be surprised the amount of things that aren't tables that you can suddenly perceive as a table. If I turn a bucket upside down, it's a little table. If you and I are living in a hut and I say we can use this bucket as a table, suddenly it becomes a table. That is because in your mind, you can ascribe the meaning, the identity of anything to anything. That means ultimately there's no name or real existence to anything. We're just playing a game in our mind. We've got a list, and this is called relative imputation. It's just a handy system for naming objects, but it doesn't mean they truly exist as those objects. It's because we believe in these objects truly existing as their identities that causes us all our pain and suffering and worry and fear. When we realize they're all impermanent, when we realize they're all just a list of names in our mind, liberation. You're free. No more worries, no more self-grasping, no more fear of death, no more fear of anything. You just realize the real mind is indestructible. No need to worry about anything. You can then, from that moment, spend the rest of your life just loving, kind, helping others. You've got no self-concern, you've got no worry, you've got no fear anymore. But obviously it's a deep realization, and the path, Buddha said, it's a gradual path to that, because at the moment our mind is heavily conditioned into self-grasping, self-clinging, the identity, permanent, rock solid, this is definitely me. And so it's a gradual, you have to slowly, you can't rush into it. But what I've described to you this evening is the path to freedom, the path to happiness, the path to full liberation, and the real joy and happiness that all beings are looking for. Hope that helped, made sense. It's quite deep. Any questions? All right. So obviously the thing that's very popular in Buddhist is meditation. Everyone, and of course it should be, because it's the key. Meditation is the key to actually changing the mind. The whole point of practice is to change the mind. There's not really any other point. As I said, the Tibetan word for Buddhist is Ngampa, which means insider, which means mind. And you change the mind, and then everything gets better if you change it for the better, virtuously. But if you, obviously what a lot of people do, as you can see in the world today, all the problems, the suffering, the fighting, the anger, the crime and abuse, people are using that ability of the mind to change it into non-virtuous, to change it into negative, into a negative mind. And what Buddha has said was actually very good. He said, we are habitual. The mind is a very habitual thing. It loves habit, routine. And so instead of the negative habit, make a positive habit. It's so simple, but it's so profound. We just follow our feelings based on the idea of self-cherishing. And so not necessarily our decisions are negative, because they are always based on increasing the situation for ourselves. And this is obviously not the truth, because it will never unite the nature of mind with the all, because it's more exclusive. It's exclusive. It's cutting the mind off again with the covering. And so the positive way to have a mind, the positive way to have a positive habit of mind is to be virtuous and altruistic, and use your time, use your daily life to habituate, if there is such a word, habituate the mind with selflessness, kindness, and the bigger picture. And don't let it be caught up in a little black bubble of self-cherishing and fear. Realize that the mind is shared by all beings. The mind is the basis of all phenomena, and all the phenomena are conditioned by causes and therefore are impermanent. And therefore there's nothing to grasp at. Nothing lasts. So there's no point in clinging to it and being worried, and you just try to find the real, natural, indestructible mind, which is beyond any characteristics of self or this and that, what we call subject objectivity. There's none of that. This idea that I'm seeing that thing over there, this me and you, us and them. This duality is the problem with the mind. And so all that gets wiped away, all washed away. And in the meditation, we equalize at the moment. This meditation, by the way, what we're going to do is a meditation now. In this meditation, we will equalize all phenomena. So there's 3 levels of phenomena. There's external objects, inanimate objects. The second level is all other beings, and the third level is oneself. So it's phenomena, objects, others, and oneself. These 3 levels we will go through in this meditation, realizing in sequence the impermanence of those. And this is a meditation. Once you've learned this meditation, then obviously you can do it every day at home, and then in the future you can come and tell me if you found it beneficial, because the Buddha said you have to check, be like the gold merchant. You check to make sure it's real gold. So what he means is, don't just accept the Buddha's teachings because the Buddha gave them. Oh, the Buddha looks so wonderful, lovely. Everything he says must be true. What he said was, you try it, and then if you find it works, then you'll know. But you have to check yourself. So you kind of straight back if you can, and get comfortable. And you just try to expand your mind out into all the objects, cars, buildings, fields, trees, clouds, sky. Try to build up a picture of this entire world, all the way round. Oceans, beaches, skyscrapers, cities, the whole world, India, America. But imagine the real things right now, all the way around. And all of the objects, imagine all the, I don't know, cars, appliances, fridges, air conditioning units, tables, chairs, food, cows, cakes, everything. You imagine everything. Every single one of those objects was produced, fabricated, made. One way or another, it was produced in the past. It exists now as that object because it was put together. It's a collection of ingredients, constituents, aggregates, materials, form. You consider that, just meditate on that point, that everything is a collection of parts. Everything is actually a kit put together, and it is slowly eroding, decaying. Even a toaster, which seems to be iron and chrome and steel and tin, and it seems to look exactly the same every day. When in the future, maybe 20, 30, 50, 100 years, 200 years, it won't look like it does now. And that process doesn't start in 50, 60, 70 years time. It's happening now. It's very, very slow. You can't see it. It's not like milk. For example, milk, you can almost see it going off. 2 or 3 days if you leave it out, or even in the fridge, there are so many. So these things that go off quickly, these are excellent for the Buddhist meditator because you can actually see impermanence. So now you consider that everything is changing. Every single thing in this whole world, including the world, everything is changing. Nothing actually disappears. It only disappears from our mind. It only disappears as its denoted conceptual name or label. A toaster will disintegrate into the earth and become the earth, and then you'll call it the earth. You'll give it the label earth. So nothing actually disappears. It just changes, and we give it a different name. And so therefore names don't really mean anything. They're just relative concept. So all of the form of all of the objects in the whole world is just changing from one to another, being built again, changing, all changing, shifting. That is the basic meditation on impermanence. You just feel that nothing is staying the same, everything is changing. And therefore it lacks any kind of permanent identity. You feel that. Okay, so now the next stage is beings, what we call animate objects. Animate objects means any being that has a consciousness. So any being that has a consciousness, and there are innumerable beings in this world, more than anyone. Even the Buddha said, I can count the amount of sand, grains of sand in the bottom of the ocean, but I can't count the amount of beings in this world, because even an enlightened being can't actually, there's so many, because obviously bacteria and germs, insects and fish, plankton, it's really incredible. So anyway, all of these are caused. They are all conditioned, existent, conditioned phenomena, and therefore, as the first of the four great seals says, they're impermanent. And if they're impermanent, then it means that they don't have a permanent identity or a permanent being. It's all changing. So now you just consider how you normally think of others. When you normally think of others, you think of them as having a solid identity, character, and now it's changing. It's not so solid. That impermanence, that realization of impermanence of all beings, the way that everything about them is changing constantly, aging, and it's an ongoing process that never stops from the moment one is born. The body is changing from the baby to the adolescent, from the adolescent to the adult, to middle age, to old age. Changing, everything is changing all the time. So the point here is there's no need to grasp, there's no need to cling to it, because it's a natural law. Everything changes. So now you just consider that all the beings are changing. There's nothing solid about others. Open to change all the time. And you hold that in meditation at home. You will just hold that, and it will become a non-conceptual realization eventually. It's not just a thought, it actually turns into a feeling in your heart. And then finally, the final stage is oneself, and this is the most important one. The one thing that you are most certain of as being solid and unchanging and permanent is oneself. And oneself, mentally, you are imputing your identity, yourself, on this body. This body is the basis of imputation. And yet, through this meditation of impermanence, you can obviously, logically, absolutely, directly see, just by using your worldly knowledge of everyday, what happens to the body, as you know, as we just said, baby, adolescent, a child, an adolescent, and then an adult, and middle age. It changes. It's nothing to worry about. It's just a natural truth. The reason we worry about it is because we've got the wrong idea and we cling to a permanent, never changing self. That permanent, never changing self is just in the mind. Everything that it's imputed on is changing, constantly changing, always impermanent, just the same as everything else. So you hold that idea, and this is the main one. You will, if you really go deep with this, you will find that the ego tries to fight back. The self-clinging, the self-grasping really tries to attack this idea. No, there must be something that's real. There must be something that's truly oneself. Don't let it. You just gently, every day you do this meditation, and you will find your mind becomes so much more pliant, flexible, light, light-hearted, and loving, and kind to others, and not concerned about your own situation at all, because everything is impermanent. Everything is changing. So we don't need to cling to anything, especially the self. Clinging to ourself is what causes all the suffering in this world, and mainly the suffering that you are experiencing is caused by your clinging to yourself. And it's just a mind trick. It's a deluded covering of the real, natural, omniscient mind. So you hold that information. We call this vipassana. And then you hold that, and as you hold that, and it goes from concept into non-conceptual feeling in the heart, that is when you can class it as what we call shamatha, which means a single-pointed meditation on a non-conceptual realization. And so that's what you're aiming for eventually. But to start with, just use this investigation or examination of a topic, and then slowly turn it into a heartfelt, direct realization, non-conceptual realization. Anyway, hopefully you've got some kind of very peaceful, free, liberated feeling in your heart, and bring that back into this world, into this room now, and try to utilize that peaceful, loving, shared, omniscient feeling in your dealings with others and with your own thoughts. When you think about things, when you think about yourself, you know, if you apply this altruistic, omniscient equality or equanimity into your thoughts, into your feelings, you'll find life is a lot easier, a lot more acceptable, less repugnant. Anyway, come back into this room. Thank you. I hope that was helpful. Sorry, quite a lot of details. All right then, not questions, just a comment. Anything? Anyone?
What I'm confused about.
Sorry?
What I'm confused about is, in pursuit of liberation and impermanence.
Yes.
When you get to that, or anywhere near it,
yes,
isn't that automatically the recognition your ego is kicking in?
No.
How do you get rid of that? How do you recognise?
Very good question. Very, very good question. Wonderful. Well done.
Hear that question?
It's
No. Excuse me. We didn't quite hear that question.
Oh, sorry.
It sounded interesting, but we just didn't catch it.
What I said was, in pursuit of the liberation and the impermanence, as you might near that, I'm not saying you reach it exactly, as you might near that through meditation and through practice, surely when you get there, the only way of recognising it, I would think, would be through ego then kicks in, because how do you recognise it unless your ego...
That's very good.
Is that like a catch-22?
Yeah.
So the reason it's a wonderful question is because it's you're applying worldly logic. That is exactly the normal way that we experience situations. Any situation. You feel that I am experiencing this. But in this particular part, in the path to enlightenment, liberation, the whole point is that there is no experiencer and there is no experienced. When you take that away, what we call, like I said, the subjective, objective, so subject and object, when you remove that from the situation, from the experience, and it's what we call a mind-only experience, and it takes a while, you know, but eventually you'll get there, and it's quite easy for me to explain it, and I hope that you will understand from this explanation. The answer actually to your question is the whole reason why monks and nuns especially are so humble. You will notice that the real monks and nuns, the main quality that they've got that is lacked by the normal worldly people, sentient beings, is their humility. They're so humble. Humble means no sense of self internally, inside, in the mind, no sense of self. The saint, all right, in the West we talk about saints, right? They're heroes or heroines. They can be male or female. When you think about a saint, that is, if you've got it right, then you are thinking about humility, utter selflessness, right? Only love and care for others. And so from your question, a good question would be, so how does the saint experience things? How does a saint, a true realised saint, selfless, if one is selfless, how can one be one? How can one experience anything without the self? The answer is we're all experiencing things, everything, all the time without the self, because there's no self. The self is just an idea. So it will be exactly the same when you experience liberation and enlightenment as it is now, except without the idea of self.
So you'll never know. Is that?
Yeah, you'll know. You know now, don't you? And there's no self.
Okay.
It's just that at the moment you feel that there's a self experiencing it. But actually there's no self in experience. All experience is selfless. All the time, for everyone. But we just think there's someone experiencing it. Does that make sense?
Kind of. It's just that we use self to monitor ourselves, don't we?
We use the self to conceptualize experience. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
It's rubbish. There's no need to. Experience is all the time. The mind is experiencing, even when we're dead. There's no we're dead, by the way. It's just another concept, another bit of the story. The body is born in the first place because we grasp at the self. That we want to, the mind is not we. I must stop saying that, because actually it gives us some kind of guilt, like, oh, what did I do wrong? It's nothing to do with us. Over the many long time, the mind has developed this idea of a separate existence, and that's what causes birth. But to be honest, if there's no beings available, for example, if there's no beings available to give birth to beings, to reproduce, then the mind, although it has that self-grasping and it wants to validate its existence by having a body to impute the self on, it can't be born, of course. And there's long periods of the universe when there's nowhere to be born, and the mind, the deluded mind, just has to wait. Sorry, a bit deep.
Now I'm thinking about children now, because I'm thinking like, when everybody's born,
Yeah.
they've always got that ego, haven't they, from little? I'm
Yes.
thinking of,
From past lives.
Yeah.
But listen, you lot, right? Us lot, I should say. Now, because we're doing this, our future lives won't be like that. We are destroying that deluded idea of self, and so our rebirth will be completely different. We are now taking a different track, I promise. Even just coming to this talk, if this is the only Buddhist talk you ever come to, it has changed your future lives dramatically for the better. Because normal people, when they spend their whole life self-cherishing, they necessarily I've got to be very careful, don't take rebirth the same as we are at the moment. Let's put it like that.
But if the gentleman behind you started at the age of 7
Yes.
to reach that higher status of not self
Liberation.
liberation.
Yes.
I've been here for 1 hour,
Yes.
and I think it's just going, okay, it's an introduction, there's a load of questions, and because the concepts are abstract and they're each one has got its own depth and tentacles.
Yes.
But it feels that it's really quite a comfort if one could reach that stage, because then all the angst and the self-effacing, so all of that can be just neutralised by the fact, well that's okay, because I'm kind of altruistic, I've got my good points, so I'll be reborn. But the implementation of that's just a theory, but you'd have to practice it and understand and have more tutoring. Yes. And experiential thing over. I mean, and yes. Once you're septuagenarian, I mean, that guy started at 7.
Yeah.
I mean, how long do you need?
Well, it depends. In the West, one thing I would say is, in the West, we have an extraordinary amount of merit we've accumulated. That's what causes us to have all these good conditions. We are living in the first world, and to be honest, it's not a conceptual thing that I'm talking about now. I'm talking about actually what's happening. We're talking about directly what's happening in the situation. All right, we are extraordinarily high in merit. It means we've got a lot of virtuous, positive energy accumulated from the past. That's what causes us to, one, be born as human, and second, to have all these wonderful conditions. That means that we have a certain amount of we are able to realise very quickly, because merit, that accumulation of merit, is the basic foundation, the prerequisite of being able to realise selflessness. With that merit, and in the Western world, especially in the first world, many people, you and I in other words, we have got this we've got wonderful conditions externally, and we've got good conditions internally, and that is enough. Even at a late stage, in a year, you can make a massive difference, huge difference. So don't worry about time. The Buddha actually said, even if one hears one line of Dharma on one's very last day of one's life, it will completely change the future route through, rebirths. So it's that powerful. And the reason it's that powerful, let me just explain something. The reason it's that powerful is relative, right? And what relative means is, generally, if you look at numerically, mathematically, how many beings there are in the world, and then you think about how many beings there are that even hear that there's such a thing as the Dharma, right? The actual ultimate truth teaching, doctrine, whatever you want to call it. And then how many people out of that set actually hear it, and then how many actually understand it, and then how many actually, it's getting smaller and smaller, and then how many actually practice it, prolonged, sequentially, each day. So the set is getting smaller and smaller. So you could say, oh, good God, existence is absolutely horrific. What's going on? We could be reborn anywhere, and blah, blah, blah. But the reason it's so horrific and that so many people are reborn in terrible situations is because no one does anything. No one ever listens to anything to do with the ultimate truth. No one ever listens to the Dharma. No one ever listens to any kind of spiritual path teaching and then goes ahead and does any practice. And so when you're asking about Kenpo and actually doing practice, so if you practice like they have, then of course, compared to people who do absolutely nothing and spend their whole life self-cherishing, then it's a very, very, very quick escape. That's basically what we're talking about. Liberation means escape. What we're escaping from is the cause of suffering in the future lives, and the cause of suffering in the future lives is that our idea of a personal self. We are all the same. Skin is the same, bone is the same, blood is the same, consciousness is the same, mind is the same, but we think it's personal. We think my mind, my consciousness, my blood, my bone. If you go to the hospital and they say, oh no, sorry, we're going to have to cut your hand off, just see it as anyone's hand. Then we won't worry. And that's the truth. That's not a technique. So it's just a slight change. But no one ever tells anyone, oh, you stop self-cherishing. Stop thinking it's your hand. If you go out in the street and tell them that now, what's your name?
My name's Rita.
Rita, if you go out in that chip shop now over the road and you say, stop thinking they're your hands, they'll think you're nuts. But it's the truth. The truth is crazy, but it's true. You either accept it or you don't. But it's obvious, really. Your flaming hands, if you look at them, they're your mother's hands. They're not even your hands. It's right there in front of us.
Can I ask another question now?
Of course.
You know when you said about merit, because we live in the Western world?
Yes.
Does that mean it's beneficial?
Yes, because you can use it for... You need to have a virtuous, meritorious, oh God, I've got to do this without trying to sound racist.
The only reason I'm asking that is because effectively I would have thought it's not beneficial, because in the Western world we're so materialistic and money orientated and goal focused and totally the opposite of all of the things.
Yeah, well, that's quite complicated. But basically, we're talking about external and internal.
Right.
Externally, yes, we're deluded, but internally, we have the merit if we focus our attention away from materialism and onto actually realising contemplation of the truth, ultimate truth, pursuit of, as you said, pursuit of the ultimate truth. Not that there's a pursuer. But that merit that we work with, that we have been using for buying a nice rose in the garden centre, and I mean, you've got to think of the amount of people, humans in this world who haven't got those conditions. There are plenty of human beings in this world who don't even know what a shop is, and yet we spend our whole life wandering around them. So anyway, it's that merit internally in our mind, which we have accumulated, and it's obviously it's right. A certain amount of it has been exhausted through our birth and our life, but we still have some. We still have a virtuous mind, the potential for a virtuous mind in there from that merit. And what I mean by, I don't want to sound racist, is there are many, many people in the world. They do have the potential. Every human being has a chance, an opportunity to become virtuous. Compared to the animals are very set, single track. It's very difficult for them to change. But it's possible. As a human, it's possible to change the mind, and that's the very important thing. But what I'm saying is, the first world, born in the first world, that is a sign that one has a relatively higher amount of merit, and that means there's more chance for you to be able to change your mind internally. Nothing to do with the external world at all. It's just through birth. It's a sign. So we have to use that. We don't have to, it's up to you. I can't force you.
Hi, I have a question regarding the Western world and other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Like you say, like the first world, what do you call it? Like a certain collective amount of merit containing some parts of the world, in existence, rather than just it's this type of person who's
No, our karma from the past lives causes us to be born in a certain place, certain people with certain conditions. And so you have to just look at it. The secret to the Dharma, understanding the world, understanding reality, our situation, is always to look at it from the point of view of the mind. All right, the condition of the mind. Our external conditions, our body, our length of life, our health, our prosperity, amount of friends, amount of enemies, everything is controlled by what we did in the past. It's our karma. And so what the great Buddhist Indian saint Atisha said was, if you want to understand what your past life was like, or past lives were like, look at your future life. If you want to understand what your future life is going to be like, look at your present life. So if you want to know what you were like in the past, look at your present life. What's happening to you now, good things, they're the good things you did in the past. Bad things are happening to you now, they're the bad things you did in the past. If you want to know what your future life is going to be like, look at your present life. The good things you're doing now, they are the good things that will happen in the future. The bad things you're doing now, they are the bad things you're doing in the future. But that is not the point of the Buddha Dharma. Buddha Dharma, the Buddhist path, the teachings of the Buddha's doctrine is designed for you to escape, not for you to take a higher rebirth. We are trying to escape from what is known in Sanskrit as samsara. Samsara means existence, because all existence is suffering. No matter where you're born, even if you're born as a long life god, there will be suffering, So, you normally, the lay people, people like me, our practice causes a higher rebirth, but we pray every day that in that higher rebirth we continue practicing. We don't just want a higher rebirth so that we can drink champagne and own a yacht. We use it until we can escape, because no matter how high you're born in samsara, you always end up going down again. Hence, it's called the wheel of life, because it just goes round and round. It's pointless, and it's all impermanent.
I was just going to ask about impermanence in itself. I find it quite paradoxical that...
What's your name?
Greg.
Must remember that, Greg.
No worries. In the fact that change is the only thing that is permanent. So that in itself kind of defeats the objective of impermanence, the concept of change, which is constantly changing, which makes it kind of permanent.
Yeah. Well, what you're actually explaining is the primordial awareness. It's the primordial awareness that makes the change permanent. Think about that.
I'll go home with that one.
Impermanence is permanent because of the primordial awareness, which is free of any characteristics. So it's it's true what you say, but to get to it directly as a realization, you will have to do a lot of meditation. Just putting it into words doesn't really make any difference to the mind. A little bit, but you've got to really, truly understand, be able to look at your body and think, oh, it's just form. Not identify with it. But that's a long way in the future. We're just talking about the general path, basis of the path, gradual process. But what my advice to you is, the reason these two talks are free is because it's genuinely the point of the Buddhists in this world, that their duty to help people understand the truth, the ultimate truth of this situation, and help people to stop pretending, stop assuming that they know what's going on. You have to learn what's going on. It's very important. We all do. I had trouble facing it in the first place, and everyone has trouble facing it in the first place. No one likes to take medicine. No one likes to admit that they're ill. But to escape, to get better, you have to admit that you're ill. You have to take the medicine. And our pride and ego stops us doing that. Rubbish. I don't want to know. People walk out. 25 years I've been doing these talks, and people have just walked out so many times because they're fed up, they're angry. I don't want to hear that. It's no good. There's no point in you don't. It's like going to the hospital and the doctor saying, "No, sorry, you're very ill." Rubbish, and just walking out. We have to admit we've got mental problems. If the samsara existence is a mental problem. So no one wants to admit that. Everyone thinks they're perfect. Everyone thinks they're pure, got no problems, everything's going well. I've got a greenhouse, for God's sake. I've got a Tesco club card, can't be wrong, nothing wrong with me. So it's that like that. It's very tricky. The ego is very tricky, and it hides the truth from us, and it makes us cling to a very luxurious little self bubble until that bubble pops. And then we have got no idea what's going on. We're completely lost, and we just freak out and panic. No need to freak out and panic. If you know anything about the Dharma, you will realise it's all impermanent. It doesn't matter. It's an illusion. Like a dream. But my final thing I would like to say, because I need to stop talking. Buddha was walking along the road, and a very high, like sadhu or Indian yogi was coming the other way, clairvoyant. And he looked at Buddha, and for the first time in a long time, he couldn't read the mind, he couldn't understand anything about this being. And he said as the Buddha approached, very tall, golden body, light coming from the head, etc. And the yogi said, "What are you?" And the Buddha said, "Awake." The word for awake is Buddha in Pali. So there's no identification there. What he is saying is what you're seeing, what you're experiencing there, the body, the clear, pure mind with no characteristics, etc., is just a being or a mind, let's say, that has woken up from the dream, the psychotic dream, the psychosis, sleepy psychosis of existence, the self, awake. But enlightenment or liberation means awakened. You've woken up from the dream. Just like when you wake up in the morning and you've had a good dream or a bad dream, and you wake up and it's, oh, it was just a dream. It seemed so real, but it was just a dream. That's liberation. That's what it will be like. You'll be free, and you'll realise it was all just a dream, and there was no need to worry about anything at all.
So, I know you need to finish now, but does that mean that you don't worry about things?
You must be. You're higher than me. I worry. No, it's not. It's slowly. It's a gradual process. Personally, for me, it would be interesting. I'll be honest with you, all right, because you're asking a personal question, and I admire it very much, but it's embarrassing. But anyway, for me personally, I secretly hanker after losing everything, and being out on the street. Right, that is kind of our perverse test that we think about. We do dream of, everything going wrong, completely going wrong, to test our mind. We look forward to the test. So it's a very strange, it happens when you practice.
Well,
Because it has to be real.
Yeah.
You find out then whether your practice has been real or not, don't you?
well, Braverman described that as a lifestyle choice.
Yeah. If it's a choice, it's a different state of mind. It has to be not through choice.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it?
I got it.
Well done. So what I'm saying to every single one of you here, imagine that you are penniless, naked, laying, bleeding in the gutter, and it's pouring down with rain. You've got no food, no money, and your mind is still blissfully free. If you can do that, then you're a real saint. I prostrate to you. That is the real king. Forget Charles, Trump. They're all perfumed, some idea. The real king is laying in the back streets of India now in a puddle of urine with maggots eating his leg. And doesn't mind, because he realises all mind is all impermanent. It's just a dream. That is the real king of the world. That's why there's medicants, and some what we call Buddhists were called samanas, the medicants who wandered in the forests naked and nothing, no food, nothing, didn't know where. And also in Tibet they had the original Kampas, these great masters. They come from a place called Kham in Tibet, and the nomadic Kampas, they were high up in the Himalayas in the snows, and life-threatening, constantly life-threatening, every day, every night. You never know whether you're going to wake up. It's so cold. And what they do is they carry a clay pot or sometimes an iron pot with the embers of the fire. In every Tibetan, in the nomads up in the mountains, they carry these ember pots, and it enables you to quickly light a fire when it's so cold, right? They always keep a fire going. And the Kampas, the original Kampas, they were the ones who used to put the embers out completely. And everyone in Tibet thought they were insane to do it. And the reason they put it out is because of impermanence. Because if you keep those embers in your pot, it means, because overnight, the fire might go out and then you have these embers to start it in the morning. But the Kampas, they said, by keeping these embers, you are expecting to wake up in the morning. And that's wrong. That's attachment. That's not impermanence. If you really truly believe in impermanence, you don't expect to wake up in the morning. You never know. So that's very high, deep practice, of course. Risking one's life for a principle of the practice, but very good. Not necessarily sensible, but it's a wonderful example of truly practicing impermanence. Freedom. That's real liberation when you're not frightened of death like that. That's wonderful. Anyway, good luck. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.